Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Marco Nuyen and I'm a trainer at Microsoft. This video is part of a series of videos about the role of a Microsoft cybersecurity architect. In this video, I want to elaborate on identity and access management and Microsoft Entra specifically. The content of this video is mostly aligned with the area of security operations, identity and compliance from a certification perspective. Now, a question. What is the role of identity and access management and Entra? The main question for you to be able to answer is what is that role and what about Entra for that? Let us get started with a quiz question on the topic of IAM. What is it? Identity and access management, IAM, is important from a cybersecurity perspective because, well, it ensures that only authorized users can access the resources they need and prevents unauthorized access. Or is it because it enables users to create and manage their own account and passwords without any security controls? Or is it allows users to share their credentials with other users and applications without any risk? Now, come on. A, right? A is the correct answer because IAM is the process of verifying the identity of users and granting them the appropriate permissions to access resources they need. IAM helps protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data and systems by preventing unauthorized access and enforcing the principle of least privilege. A and C are really, really wrong, right? So identity should never be shared. So that's not a good thing. All right. The main objective for the video is to remind ourselves of the importance of identities and identity and access management and capabilities with Entra. This is an example from the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark, the MCSB, where it focuses on identity. Again, as explained in other videos, the lower the number, the higher the priority. IAM1, Identity Management 1, says we need to use a centralized identity and authentication system. This is something we need to check, implement, and include in our designs. In the Microsoft portfolio, this is covered by Entra ID and Active Directory domain services. That's why I've put them on the side here on the slide. There are many aspects in the Entra capabilities, and as usual for cloud, they will change and evolve. As the cybersecurity architect, you would do well to inform yourselves more about the capabilities of the Entra family and what it can bring to you. Now, stepping away from the MCSB, I've got a picture here about the Zero Trust architecture to remind ourselves of that again. We see identities, endpoints, data, apps, infrastructure, and network, and we try to bring all of that together to have overall automation, visibility, and orchestration. Entra and the Entra family capabilities will come back regularly when we talk about identities and Zero Trust. It is important to get familiar with the Entra family. We will go and cover some aspects of that in this video. A good starting place for Entra is the product page. And there's a short link to that, aka.ms/Entra. There's a course on the role of identity administrator that goes deeper into the aspects of identity management and capabilities of Entra. And I would say it's foundational knowledge for a cybersecurity architect. And in here, I just want to remind you of some of these capabilities. For convenience, I also included a link to the certification page for the identity administrator, aka.ms/SC-300, SC-300. We will look at a couple of aspects in this video, but you need to know or learn more, and that's a good place to do so. Tenancy. Tenants and tenancy are core concepts for Entra ID. I often ask in a training if people know what a tenant is, and many people have trouble answering that. And you need to know. And I can't ask you and wait for an answer in a video. I ask Copilot, and you can do the same. If you have a question, consider using an AI to get an answer. A tenant represents an organization or entity within the Microsoft Entra ecosystem. It serves as a dedicated instance of Microsoft Entra ID that an organization receives at the beginning of their relationship with Microsoft. Each tenant is distinct and separate from other tenants, maintaining its own set of identities, app registration, and configurations. Distinct and separate, it is a boundary. It is something we get and we can control. It is like a security boundary. I often compare it to renting a flat in a building. You become tenant in the building and you have your own flat. You can bring in furniture and you can live with your family, and maybe the family will change in size over time. You can also have guests in your flat, and you can use a lot of infrastructure that is available. An Entra ID tenant is like renting a flat in a building. You get a place for your own in an existing infrastructure, bring your apps, bring your family, and invite others in. But what can we have in a tenant once we have one? Users and applications? Yes, but there's more. A tenant can contain different types of objects, such as accounts, and accounts can represent users, devices, or applications. For users, these can be internal accounts that we have created or external accounts that we have invited from another tenant. We also have other objects like roles and groups. Roles are specific sets of permissions, such as the global administrator role, which allows an account to manage everything if they are assigned the role. We want to reduce this kind of privilege, so role management is an area of focus for us as cybersecurity architects. And there are many roles with varying permissions and different privileges. We will have a separate video on privileges in the video series. Another thing we can see on the diagram is groups, which are useful for managing accounts together. And if we have 1 million users, we don't want to deal with each and everyone separately. We want to group them and handle them as a group. And these are some of the things that we can have in a tenant. Let's focus a bit more on identities itself. What kind of identities do you need to think of? What kind of identities do you need to include, address, or assess in the cybersecurity architecture? I included a little mind map I made earlier today on this slide. First level is identities that are interactive and non-interactive. You could say users and workloads. Identities are typically, when they're interactive, typically for people, for humans. Identities that are not interactive are identities for equipment and applications, and they're therefore workloads. There is no human being that can interact. They are different in their dynamics, and they will be used differently. When we talk about interactive identities, we can distinguish between internal and external ones. Internal ones are the ones that we create ourselves in our own tenant, while external identities are the ones that come from other organizations, such as business partners through business to business or through social networks like business to consumer. There's also a kind of external identity which is based on a verified credential, and we call it verified ID. This is when a user has an identity that is verified by, for example, a financial, governmental, or healthcare institute, and can use an aspect of that identity to interact with other services. The user has chosen to leverage an existing identity from a trusted party that they want to leverage. For example, to prove that they're over 21. Only that they're over 21, not anything else. Internal accounts are the accounts that people belong to in an organization. People in our organization might get an account in a tenant. They are either created directly in the tenant or synced from on-premises using synchronization technologies. These synced identities are typically known as hybrid identity, because the user has an identity in both the cloud world and the on-premise world. Hybrid is the word that is often used for combining cloud and on-premises technologies. For non-interactive accounts, we can make a distinction in devices and service principals. Any device can have a registration where some information about the device is stored in the tenant, and Windows-based devices can also be joined, where they've got a full object in a tenant, similar to an account for a user, but of course it's different in its dynamics because it's non-interactive, it's for a device. For service principals, there's not a split, and there's actually 3 kinds of them, but one is legacy, and we will not talk about that one in anymore from now on. The 2 that are left out of the 3 are applications and managed identities. You see them in the graphic. Applications need an identity to interact with the tenant, so they must be registered and have a presence in the tenant. Users who want to interact with an application also need to get proof from the tenant that is specific to the application. Having an account and an application registration is essential for the interaction and establishing proof. We also see managed identity as a service principle. Managed identity is something we usually see in Azure. Any service running on Azure that needs an identity, it can have a managed identity. We can create a managed identity as a user and associate it with the thing running on Azure, or we can let the platform create it for us. If we create it as a user, it's called a user-signed managed identity. If we let the platform create that identity, it's called a system-signed managed identity. This is very Azure specific, but it helps avoid to avoid creating service accounts that usually are not managed so very well. So consider this a quick recap of what identities are which ones and why do we have them. And if any of them is not familiar to you, then go and study on this. And if you're going to take the certification, I'm pretty sure that you'll get quite a lot of questions on what are these, how do they work, how do you work with them? And identities will come and go. So we also need to think about life cycles and life cycle management. One of the things we need to watch out for and what we need to consider is life cycles of different identities and different entities. How are they created? How are they removed? And what happens in between? What about updates? And who owns that? It's about accountability. Let's take a practical example. Suppose I have an account that is created and provisioned, and then it will be deleted and I leave the company. How is my account provisioned and how do I get all the things I need, like permissions, software, application, rules? Are they accurate and appropriate for my job? What if I change roles? Do I still have the right permissions? That needs to be verified. And that's why we have to have a review process at the station, as shown on the graphic on the right side. We also need to think about delegation. We need to assign tasks to people who are responsible for a task. So that's another factor we need to consider in identity management, delegation. And what technologies and processes do we have to automate these? Do we have an identity access management system that can do it for us? Or do we need to create some automation based on protocols like SCIM, the system for cross-domain identity management? Things to go and look for. Also in the graphic, there's something else. There's a mention of entitlement management. One feature that can assist is entitlement management. Entitlement management is an identity governance capability that lets organizations handle identity and access lifecycle at scale by automating workflows for access requests, assignments, to do reviews, and to let things expire. People in an organization require access to various groups, applications, and things like PowerPoint, websites, portals, to be able to do their work. This is hard to manage, and as needs change, that needs to be reflected. New applications are added, users need more access rights. And it becomes more complex when you work with external organizations. As an external party, you may not know in the other organization what is required. You may not know what's available to you. People from an external party won't know what applications, groups, or sites exist, and entitlement management can help you manage access to groups, applications, SharePoint, online sites more effectively for internal users and for users that are not part of your organization, external users. Basically for everyone that needs access to those resources. A great capability of entitlement management is catalogs that can let users, internal and external, see what's on offer for them and then request it. And then they get access automatically, or if that's configured, someone else needs to approve the access. It helps users to be able to self-service, and for us it helps since we get visibility of who, what, where, and how. And we can control access by expiration or access review processes. Access reviews are a process where we can ask someone to confirm something. For example, we have a group. Are these people that are in the group, are those the people that should be in it? You oversee the group. Are the memberships still accurate? We will see these access reviews in many places, like on applications, on roles, on groups, but it's a crucial process to know about. So we can ask someone responsible, is it still valid? You own this group, go and inspect it and say whether it's still true or not. Less is more. We should aim for the least amount and the simplest option. And when it comes to a tenant, that's no different. In reality, you will encounter multi-tenancy. Maybe you acquired another company, they already had a tenant. What to do? Migrate everything or coexist? But how do you manage everything in a coexistence situation? Or maybe you have multiple tenants because of compliance requirements. Or maybe you're an organization that manages tenants for other organizations. In that case, you will encounter a multi-tenancy definitely. So if you do, consider looking at technology like, for example, Azure Lighthouse to make management a bit easier. Lighthouse is typically a technology that was created initially for service providers that deal with management of many tenants. And it's more and more used in companies that have multiple tenants inside of a company. So not so much a service provider traditionally, but more like an internal service provider. And it's a very good way to manage multiple tenants. As a Microsoft cybersecurity architect, you should use portals like the Entra portal to assess an organization and make informed recommendations. And I've included a couple of examples from the Entra portal. So we use the portal to review your identity score, access recommendations for improvement, and view tenant objects such as users, groups, roles, and applications. Really leverage the Entra portal to understand the current environment and identify future enhancements. One of my personal favorites is the identity governance dashboard that will be there, that drives down into identities and points out great recommendations. So investigate the portals. We are at the end of the video. We discussed Entra in the light of identity management capabilities. And of course, like always, there's much more. And I hope you are familiar with many of the things we discussed. And if not, go out and investigate and learn more. There's always more. So study hard. You can use short links like I've got here that were in the presentation. The first one will take you to the Microsoft Entra main page where you can find links to documentation on all features. The second one will take you to the certification page of a Microsoft Identity Administrator. That course content can be seen as essential knowledge for our Cybersecurity Architect certification. Thank you for watching the video. Meet you again in another one and stay safe.